welcome to the Biodegradable podcast where we explore different environmental careers. So, Julika Voss works at BioConsult, who use emerging AI technology to protect whales. By mapping whale migration patterns, BioConsult provides crucial data that helps decision makers allocate marine protected areas for conservation. In this episode, we explore what she does, how she got there, and any career advice she has for graduates looking to embark on a similar journey.
Yes, as already said, I would like to talk a bit about space whale, and namely about using satellite imagery to survey whales from space in remote areas and thus to enhance conservation efforts. So Spacewell actually is a service which is provided by BioConsult SH and by high-def aerial surveying. We are more than 130 employees and we have a variety of projects, like local projects in Germany, but also international projects. We are looking back to more than 20 years of environmental impact assessments of offshore wind farms, and we are conducting digital aerial surveys since 2014 in 10 countries so far. Besides, we are always looking for new people to start, so you can also use the link if you would love to join us. So most people might not know this, but actually the ocean produces at least 50% of the oxygen we breathe. Besides, it has absorbed more than 90% of the excess heat caused by human activity. So it also regulates our temperature. So we know how important our oceans are. And this is also why we aim to protect 30% of our oceans by 2030, as has been agreed in Montreal 2 years ago now. We are using satellites to detect the whales from space, and this is what we offer as a service. So in this way, we can determine the number and distribution in large areas where it's too challenging for traditional survey methods. And this information can be used for baseline studies, population assessments, and conservation efforts, helping evidence-based decision-making. On the next slide, you can see what kind of satellite we actually use. So on the one hand side, you can see the drone footage, and on the other hand side, you can see the satellite imagery. And you can perfectly see the head of the whale, then the flippers, and also the fluke of the whale. So this whale is about to dive. So this is what we usually see, only parts of the whales. But also this is what you can see in satellite imagery. And blue whales, it's like we basically don't even know how many there are, even though they are the largest animal on Earth. So we think there might be 5,000 or maybe even 25,000. We basically have no idea.
And is that one species of whale, or is that every whale?
Yes. No. One species of whale.
Okay. And which one is that you guys look at?
So we basically can look with space whale and for every species, which is like above 9 meters of body length. Because as I said, like we have a special kind of resolution, and this is the highest resolution which is commercially available at the moment. You can even see a humpback whale, which is raising its flipper out of the water, as you can see here once in drone footage, and then also in satellite imagery. So it's laying on its back and then raising its flipper out of the water. So you can also see this kind of behavior in satellite imagery.
That's super interesting. I'm really keen to hear a tiny bit about your role specifically and what you do within this team. All of this is super interesting, and I wonder what your day-to-day looks like.
Our day-to-day actually is mainly about writing funding applications because so when we started, Spacewell was partly funded by the European Space Agency, and we started in 2018. And our last demonstration project, which was funded by the European Space Agency, ended in 2022. So now we are searching for further funding to really scale Spacewell. And of course, also, it's really important to keep the algorithm up to date. So you saw a few whales from space using satellite imagery. And what you also see is that you obviously only have a few pixels where you see the whale. So if you have some human beings which are actually searching for the animals, it might be really time consuming and people might be exhausted. We need to use artificial intelligence for actually detecting the objects in the satellite imagery.
You have a team like coding that all like full time?
Yeah, so we have two teams. We have one team which is actually doing the research of space whales. So they are, for example, writing funding applications. They are training the algorithm using artificial intelligence. And then we also have a large expert review team, which is doing a quality assurance. So they are verifying that the objects which were detected by the algorithm are actually whales and not confused with other objects, such as boats, rocks, or foam. We really have different backgrounds like marine biology or AI or statistics, but also the review team, they really have different backgrounds. Some are veterinarians, some didn't do any education after leaving after grade 9 the school, so they really have different backgrounds. And they were all trained so to just like have the same knowledge for really verifying these objects.
And that's quite cool then. So I guess it's their interest in it that brought them together rather than like educational
Absolutely.
background necessarily.
Absolutely.
All of this sounds super interesting, and I'm intrigued to know more about how all the images get used. Like when you have the satellites mapping the whales, I know they get used for conservation projects, but also, for instance, commercially, you mentioned there are a few other outcomes that you guys are looking for.
Yeah, so what we do is that we provide data to find solutions for combining species conservation with the human use of the seas. So, for example, environmental impact assessments for offshore wind farms. We also provide a tool for mandatory baseline monitoring of whale populations. So it's actually prescribed to do baseline monitoring of whale populations, and it's not on a voluntary basis. And thirdly, we also fill knowledge gaps and thus enhance conservation efforts. So, for example, at the moment, we are piloting a study where we actually go into an area where we think that there are whales, but actually there has no research being conducted yet. So we are the first ones who are doing a satellite survey in this area. And then depending on our results, this area will be designated as marine protected areas.
You mentioned offshore wind. I was applying for roles in offshore wind yesterday, so I was doing some research into the challenges they're facing in Australia, and they mentioned whale migration patterns. One of the key things they were considering where they were going to put the wind site. So that's quite cool that the work you guys do end up also even impacting the energy transition, which seems quite far away from just conservation. Quite interesting. Do you have any examples to share?
Yeah, sure. So we actually already did studies off the coast of 5 continents, and just giving you one study we did, or sharing some results from one study we did in New Zealand. So we actually did a study in Port Ross, which is in the northern part of Auckland Island. And Port Ross comes with some history. So it was one of the former whaling grounds, and numbers of southern right whales dramatically declined in the first half of the 19th century. And now numbers start to increase again, but obviously you have upcoming threats like climate change, noise pollution, decreased food availability, and so on. So it's really important to continue monitoring.
So you were talking about different threats to whales. And just out of curiosity, I'd love to know, like, what are the main threats, I guess, nowadays to whales? Is it is it whaling still, or is this more climate change related?
Whaling is only allowed in a few countries. Really, it's a lot about climate change because, for example, climate change affects food availability. It affects temperatures. For example, you also see a shift in distribution in some areas. So species are seen in areas where they haven't seen before because you have warmer oceans, for example. On the other hand, you also see, for example, that you have decreased food availability and some animals get thinner because there is just like less food for them. So, and in the end, everything is related to climate change again. So this is really a big threat for them. But of course, in some areas, you still have whaling. So this also is a threat for them.
Are you already seeing the impacts of climate change on whale populations today? Is it decreasing?
You have species like North Atlantic right whales where numbers dramatically decline. But then, of course, you also have species like humpback whales in North America where numbers start to increase again. So it really depends on the species and how adaptable a species is.
Have you had experience on vessels? I know you mentioned you did some internships maybe in that. That sounded really quite cool.
Yes, so in my bachelor's, I studied biology, and then in my master's, I studied marine environmental science. I always wanted to study whales, but I felt like when being in university, I know the kind of theory, but I really have to see them. I need to know the species. So this is why I applied for many internships during university, and then I was at different places and always kind of used the places where I know they have many whale species, and see where it's nearly every day, and then be there on a boat. So I was actually doing some work with tourists. I was doing some work for the university. I was doing some work actually on a research vessel with other universities.
And did you know like that's what you wanted to do the whole time, or you just chose bio because you thought that's interesting, and then you started discovering about whales?
No, so when I was like a child, I always said I want to save the whales, not study the whales, but save the whales, without actually having an idea how to do this. So when I was 18 and just like after finishing my A levels, I said, okay, I'm gonna be on a whale watching boat, like guiding tourists.
Awesome. I'm glad you found something that is super aligned with what you wanted to do since you were a child. That's really cool. Do you have advice for if anyone's watching this who's interested in biology or whales specifically and thinking they want to go into conservation, look for these kind of internships? Do you have any advice for them?
People who were actually starting networking during university, who were not only
Hmm.
just studying at university, but already doing some internships during university. And I think this is really important to not only focus on university while being at university, but also already to have a look into fields and just like get some experiences if you would like to do this or if you would like to do something else, but then also already to get to know people who might not even just like be the right position, or who might not be the person who will actually hire you in the end, but who might know some people who will hire you in the end.
Yeah, you never know like what will come of a conversation just out of interest.
Absolutely.
And is this
Absolutely.
like all people you knew, or did you reach out to people? I know nowadays we have LinkedIn. I know a lot of students are using LinkedIn, but I don't know if many kind of reach out to like total strangers and try and chat to them. It's quite intimidating.
Yes, so I also sometimes I get some requests on LinkedIn and sometimes we have some follow-up meetings, but I think the most important networking is still like in person and not virtual.
Mm.
So this is why I love going on conferences, because this is the way how you actually get to know people.
Thank you so much for sharing your story and about what you do. I found it really fascinating. Is there any other things you want to share? Or
Be brave enough to do the thing you want to do and not say like, okay, before going to university, I'm going to study something where I'm sure that I will have a safe job in the end. But really try to do where your passion is and then study this. And I mean, like, if this is not going to work out in the end, you can still do the safe job, but I think it's worth a try.
you can always go back. You can always go back to plan B. Yeah.
Yes.